This worst thing I saw at Mercy Draw was not the women. It was the shadow of the rope. It moved across the road in a slow black line, sliding over dust, mule tracks, and a broken barrel hoop. Like the desert itself had grown a finger and was pointing at something I was meant to notice. I reined Bishop in before I knew why. From the rise above town, the whole place looked ordinary enough. A feed store, a chapel with one cracked bell, a windmill that had not turned in a week, men standing near the freight platform with their hats pulled low against the morning glare. Then the rope swung again, and I saw what it was tied to. 2 women stood on feed crates in the back of a buckboard, hands bound, necks fitted with loops that had been thrown over a beam from the old freight scale. The crates were narrow. The buckboard had one wheel braced with a stone. One kick, one shove, one nervous horse, and Mercy Draw would have itself an execution before breakfast. There were 6 men around them. Not lawmen, not soldiers, not even brave men. Just men who had found a way to make their own meanness look official. I had ridden all night from Las Cruces with 2 biscuits in my coat, a sore knee, and $7 folded inside my hatband. I was not looking for righteousness that morning. I was looking for coffee, shade, and maybe a farrier who would not charge me double because I was a stranger. But both women saw me on that rise. The younger one looked frightened in the honest way a person looks frightened when death is close enough to smell. The older one did not. She looked at me like she was measuring the last loose board in a bridge, like she had already tested every other way across. I nudged Bishop down the slope. A man with a tin star pinned to a store-bought vest stepped away from the others. He had a narrow face, a tobacco stain in his beard, and the careful swagger of a man who had practiced authority in a mirror. "That is far enough," he called. I stopped 20 paces from the buckboard. "What are they accused of?" He smiled without warmth. "Not your court." I asked the charge. A thick man by the freight door spat into the dust. "They were placed as wives by proper agreement. 4 winters, no child from either. Their husbands paid goods in stock. Contract says failed wives can be returned." Returned does not look like a rope. Tin Star's hand dropped near his revolver. They ran. From who? From lawful custody. I looked at the 2 women, then at the beam, then at the crates under their boots. "That is not custody," I said. "That is a slow murder waiting for somebody else to pretend gravity did it." Nobody laughed. The older woman's eyes did not leave my face. Tin Star stepped closer. "What is your name, stranger?" "Elias Rook." "Then ride on, Mr. Rook." "I would if you had a judge here." He frowned. I pointed at his vest. "That star come with a seal, a warrant, a cause number written by a clerk who can spell his own office?" The men shifted. That was when I knew they had paper somewhere, but not the kind that mattered. "Show me," I said. "Lay the law in my hand. I will read it slow." Tin Star's jaw tightened. The younger woman trembled so hard the crate under her left boot scraped sideways. The sound was small. It moved through me like a gunshot. I took 1 step forward. Tin Star drew halfway. I drew all the way. My pistol was old, ugly, and clean. His was prettier. That did not make it faster. Listen carefully, I said. I have no quarrel with any man here unless he decides to kill 2 bound women before I finish speaking. But if one hand touches that team, that rope, or those crates, I will put the first bullet through the hand, and the second through whatever bad thought comes next. Wind dragged dust between us. The thick man by the freight door moved back first, then another. Tin Star stayed where he was, but his revolver eased down by an inch. That inch was enough. I kept my pistol in my right hand, reached into my left boot with my left, and drew my knife. I walked to the buckboard slowly, because frightened animals and frightened mobs are kin. Move wrong around either one, and they will do something stupid. The younger woman whispered something in a language I did not know. The older one answered her without looking away from the men. I climbed onto the buckboard. The board rocked. Both women stiffened. Easy, I said, though nothing about it was easy. First I cut the rope from the younger woman's wrists, then the older one's. I did not touch the neck loops until their hands were free, because a person who thinks they are dying will fight the very thing saving them. The younger woman's fingers were cold. The older woman's were bleeding where the rope had dug through skin. When I lifted the loop from the younger one, she made a sound so quiet I almost missed it. Not a sob, not relief. Something smaller, like her soul had been holding its breath and had not yet decided if air could be trusted. The older woman stepped off the crate by herself. Then her knees gave. I caught her under one arm. For half a second she leaned into me because she had no choice. Then she straightened, took my wrist and removed my hand from her as politely as a queen dismissing a servant. The younger woman looked at me and said, in careful English, "She says she can stand." I believe her. "She also says your horse looks wiser than you." Behind me, someone snorted, before he remembered he was supposed to be angry. I looked at Bishop. He did look wiser than me. We left Mercy Draw before the sun cleared the chapel roof. I did not make a speech. I did not threaten revenge. Men like that remember humiliation better than warnings, and I had already given them enough of both. The younger woman's name was Tavi. The older woman's name was Mara. Bishop could not carry 3 people, so Mara rode first because blood had dried under her hairline, and she was too proud to admit she was dizzy. Tavi walked beside me with the loose end of Bishop's reins in her hand, as if she had quietly decided I was not in charge of my own horse anymore. We went north because the southern road ran open through flat sand, and any fool could follow us there. After a mile, Tavi asked, "Where are we going?" "To the part I have not figured out yet." She considered that. "You make decisions late." "Only the bad ones." Mara said something from the saddle. Tavi's mouth twitched. "She says that explains the rescue." I looked up at Mara. "Tell her she is welcome." Tavi translated. Mara listened, then gave one short breath through her nose. It was not quite a laugh. It was the first thing I wanted to hear again. By noon, the heat came down hard enough to make the horizon shake. We hid in the shade of a cut bank where the wash had eaten deep into the clay. I gave them water, the 2 biscuits, and half a strip of dried venison that had been in my coat too long. Tavi ate like someone trained not to ask for more. Mara ate nothing until Tavi told her I had already seen her almost hanged, so pride was not going to repair the situation. Mara took the biscuit, broke it in half, handed half back to me, and stared until I accepted it. That was Mara. Even half dead, she negotiated. When the worst heat passed, we moved again. I told them about the only place I owned. 41 acres east of the Piedra Larga Ridge. A stone house with a bad roof. A spring box that might still hold water. A shed my father had built too low because he believed everything worth doing should hurt a man's back. I had not lived there in almost 3 years. Tavi asked why. I said, "It got quiet." She waited for more. I did not give it. My father had died in that house at the start of a winter storm, and I had spent 2 days digging through frozen ground because there was nobody close enough to help. After that, every room in the place seemed to know one thing about me I did not want remembered. So I rode. Freight jobs, scout work, guarding payroll wagons, sleeping under wagons, losing money, making a little, losing that too. A man can call wandering freedom for a long time if nobody makes him define the word. That first night, we camped in a dry cedar wash. I built a fire small enough not to advertise us and large enough to keep the cold off. Tavi talked once the dark settled. The 2 women were not sisters by blood. They had been taken from different families and placed through an agency clerk who called it domestic settlement. Men who wanted wives and labor had paid in stock, tools, or coin. The paper made it sound like protection. The houses made it something else. Tavi's husband was 30 and liked rules because rules gave him a way to be cruel without raising his voice. Mara's husband was old enough to be her father. He had buried 2 wives before her and wanted a son more than he wanted a living person in his house. After 4 winters, both men declared the women useless. The contract did not say rope. Men rarely write down the ugliest part of what they mean. But Mercy Draw understood them anyway. Tavi said all this evenly, translating Mara when Mara chose to add a detail. The name of a clerk, the number of goats traded for 1 woman, the mark of a thumbprint pressed beside words neither woman had been allowed to read. The fact that a man can build a cage out of paper and still call it an agreement. I sat there with my hands around a tin cup of coffee so bitter it ought to have been illegal. When she finished, I said, "Is there anyone you trust? Family? A band you can reach?" Tavi looked across the fire at Mara. Mara watched the flames chew through cedar twigs. Finally, Tavi said, "Trust is not the same thing as return." That answer told me enough. "You can come to my place for now," I said. "It is not much. It may be less than I remember, but nobody there has a rope ready." Mara looked at Tavi. Tavi translated. Mara asked something. "She wants to know what price you put on shelter." "No price." Mara's eyes narrowed. That answer offended her more than a price would have. I tried again. "Work, maybe, if you want to stay a while. The roof leaks. The spring box will need clearing. I am poor at most things that require patience." Tavi translated. Mara studied me for a long moment. Then she pointed to the coffee pot and spoke. Tavi said, "She says your coffee is proof of that." We reached the Piedra Larga place on the 5th day. I had remembered it wrong. Not better, not worse. Just wrong in the way memory changes a place so it can keep hurting you properly. The roof had sagged at the western corner. The shutters hung crooked. Pack rats had made a kingdom in the pantry. My father's workbench was still in the shed with the same hammer lying where his hand had left it. I stood in the yard and felt the old grief rise up like dust from a slammed door. Mara walked past me. She did not ask permission. She did not comfort me. She picked up a fallen roof plank, carried it to the side yard, and dropped it in a pile. Then she pointed at another plank. I picked it up. Tavi found the spring box before sunset. The cover had split, the trough had clogged with needles, and a dead lizard had ended its ambitions in the water channel. She stared at it for a minute, then said, "I need a shovel, a wire hook, clean cloth, and a man who will not argue." I found 3 of the 4. The first month nearly broke us in ordinary ways, not dramatic ways, not the kind a story likes. Ordinary ways are worse, because nobody applauds you for surviving them. I was used to silence. Tavi was used to watching for danger in every tone. Mara was used to doing things herself, because asking had too often become a debt. Put 3 people like that under one damaged roof, and even kindness has sharp edges. I left an axe in the rain and ruined the handle. Tavi stacked kindling where I always set my saddle, and I tripped over it in the dark. Mara moved my father's hammer from the workbench to the kitchen door because that was where she needed it, and I felt anger flare so quick it embarrassed me. I did not yell. I went outside and split wood for an hour, which is just another way some men yell. When I came back, the hammer was on the table. Mara was beside it. She touched the handle, then touched her own chest, then pointed toward the kitchen door. Not apology, explanation. I touched the handle, then pointed toward the shed, then rested my hand over my heart, because I did not have her language, and my English was not built for grief. She understood. The next morning, the hammer hung on a peg halfway between the shed and the kitchen. That was the first treaty of our household. There were others. Tavi took over numbers because she could look at a sack of flour, 3 jars of beans, a coil of wire, and a sick horse, and know which problem would arrive first. She made lists in a notebook left by my father, writing in a small, careful hand that looked too graceful for the hard facts it carried. Mara understood animals better than any person I had met. Bishop had never trusted women or men or weather or gates or his own shadow. On the 3rd morning, Mara stood by the corral and waited. She did not reach for him. She did not click her tongue. She simply stood with one shoulder turned, as if offering him the chance to ignore her with dignity. After 10 minutes, Bishop walked over and put his nose against her sleeve. After that, he followed her like he owed her money. She traded 2 afternoons of mending fence for a milk goat with one blind eye and an attitude worse than mine. Tavi named the goat Mercy because she said it was important to make jokes before bitterness made them for you. I fixed the roof. Mara rebuilt the hearth. Tavi cleared the spring box and made water run cold through the trough again. Slowly the place stopped feeling abandoned and started feeling interrupted, as if it had not been dead, as if it had only been waiting for people stubborn enough to argue it back awake. I noticed Mara most in the mornings. She woke before light and walked the edge of the yard while the sky was still gray. She checked the goat, the horse, the hens she had somehow acquired from a wagon family passing west, and the little row of beans Tavi had planted near the south wall. She touched everything once, not possessively, carefully, like she was asking the world whether it had held through the night. One morning I found her sitting on the low wall facing east. The sun had not risen. The ridge was still black against the paling sky. I sat a few feet away. Neither of us spoke. The light came up slowly, touching the broken places first. Roof edge, corral rail, the cracked stone above the door. Her hands folded over her knees. After a while, she said in English, "This place is hurt." I nodded. She searched for the next words. "Hurt is not dead." Then she stood and went to milk the goat. I stayed there longer than I needed to. 6 weeks after Mercy Draw, Judd Peeler came to collect what he thought belonged to other men. I was mending the far fence when I heard Tavi shout. By the time I reached the yard, Peeler and 2 riders were already there. He had his tin star. He also had a folded paper, and the same expression he wore the day I humiliated him, only now he had polished it into purpose. Mara stood in the doorway with a skinning knife in her hand. Tavi stood near the spring trough holding the shovel. The blind goat stood between them and Peeler's horse, looking ready to defend the property for reasons known only to God and goats. Peeler saw my rifle before he saw my face. "Rook," he said, "these women are named in a complaint." "What complaint?" "Breach of contract, theft of goods, flight from assigned households." "People are not goods. Territorial court may see different." "No," I said, "it will not." He lifted the paper. I did not move. "Read the judge's name," I said. Peeler's mouth tightened. "Read it." He looked down at the paper as if he might find a judge hiding there if he stared hard enough. I reached into my coat and pulled out my own letter. It was creased, sweat-stained, and worth more than any gun I owned. I had sent for it the week after we reached the house, riding 34 miles each way to get it posted through a stage agent who owed me a favor. Deputy clerk in Las Vegas says no filed order exists for Mara or Tavi. No custody transfer, no criminal warrant, no authority for private seizure. I unfolded it. He used very dull language, but that is the shape of it. Peeler's 2 riders stopped looking confident. I stepped closer. "Now here is the part that concerns you. If you come onto this land again, I ride that letter to the circuit judge. Then I ride it to the Rio Grande Register. Then I give them your name, the name of every man at that freight scale, and the story of 2 women standing on crates with ropes around their necks, while a tin star pretended to be law." Peeler's face darkened. "You think papers care about 2 Indian women?" "No," I said. "I think papers care about exposing a fool with a badge he did not earn. Sometimes justice has to travel inside somebody else's vanity. I will use whichever road is open." For a moment, nobody moved. Then the goat bit Peeler's horse on the knee. The horse jumped. One of Peeler's riders cursed. Tavi laughed once, sharp and surprised. Mara did not laugh, but her eyes changed. Peeler gathered his reins. "This is not finished. It is on my land." He looked at the rifle. Then he left. We watched until the three riders shrank into the heat shimmer. My hands started shaking once they were gone. Tavi noticed. Mara noticed too. Neither said a word. Mara came over, took the rifle from me, checked the chamber, and handed it back butt first. Then she touched my shaking hand with 2 fingers and said, "Alive shakes." That was all. It was enough. Winter came mean. The roof held, but the cold found every seam in the stone. Flour ran low. A snowstorm buried the North Trail for 4 days. The blind goat developed opinions about sleeping indoors, and for one regrettable night, she won. Then Tavi got sick. It started as a cough. By the 3rd day, it had gone deep enough that each breath seemed to scrape her ribs on the way out. Mara brewed roots, bark, and bitter leaves. I rode through sleet to bring back quinine, mustard plaster, and a doctor who charged me more than the horse was worth and still looked surprised when I paid. For 9 days, the house became only one thing: the next breath. Mara and I moved around each other without speech. Water, fire, cloth, broth, sleep in chair, wake, listen, count, pray, though neither of us said to who. On the 7th night, Tavi opened her eyes and whispered, "Do not let Mercy eat my notebook." I cried in the woodpile where nobody could see me. She lived. After that, something in the house shifted. Not suddenly, not like a door thrown open. More like a roof taking weight properly after the last beam is set. Spring found us tired, and still there. The bean row became 2 rows. The goat had a kid with 1 white ear. Mara broke Bishop to a light cart, which offended him until he realized carts carried oats. Tavi taught herself enough law from borrowed newspapers to write a letter that made a tax assessor apologize for charging me on acres I did not own. I began to wake before dawn without dread. That may not sound like much. It is everything, if you have lived long enough waking to nothing. I watched Tavi argue with the ledger. I watched Mara stand in the corral with sunlight along her cheek. I listened to the house make morning sounds around 3 people instead of 1. The place had not become easy. It had become worth the trouble. By May, Mara spoke to me more directly. Her English came in clean, deliberate pieces. She never wasted words decorating what she meant. One evening, while we patched a gate, she asked, "Why did you not sell this land?" I said, "I tried." "No." I looked at her. "You told yourself, sell. You did not try." That was unfair, mostly because it was true. I drove a nail too hard and bent it. She took the hammer from me, pulled the nail, set it straight, and handed it back. "My father died here," I said. "I know." I thought leaving would make it hurt less. Did it? No. She nodded, as if this confirmed something she had suspected about both grief and men. Then she said, "A roof remembers storms. Still, it is a roof." I looked at the gate, because looking at her was becoming difficult in a way that had nothing to do with fear. The feeling between us had been growing for months, quietly, stubbornly, like grass coming through a floorboard. I did not trust myself with it. She had been taken once by a man who called possession marriage. I would not put even the shadow of a claim near her. So I waited. Then waited too long. Then made cowardice look like respect, because men are skilled at dressing fear in better clothes. In early June, Tavi went to bed with a headache after spending the day making a new shelf for the pantry. Mara and I sat outside beneath the repaired eaves. The sky had that violet color that lasts only a few minutes, when the day has ended, but night has not yet put its name on anything. She stood to go in. I said, "Mara." She stopped. Every brave word I had ever spoken abandoned me. "I want you to know this place is yours," I said. "Not because you work here, not because you owe me. You do not. You never did." She turned fully. I forced myself to continue. "If someday you leave, I will saddle Bishop and pack food and ride as far as you ask. I mean that. But if you stay, I want you staying because the roof feels like yours, because the morning does, because—" I swallowed. "Because I would rather hear you insult my coffee than sit in peace without you." She watched me with that bridge-measuring look from Mercy Draw. Then she walked over, took my hand, and placed it flat against the post that held up the eave. "This post," she said, "was cracked. I know. You cut out bad wood, put new beside old. Now it holds." Yes. She moved my hand from the post to her own chest. "I stay." I could not speak. She did not require it. The next morning I asked Tavi what she wanted, plainly and separately, while Mara was out with the cart. I told her the same truth. She could stay, she could leave. I would help either way, no debt, no bargain hidden under kindness. Tavi listened with her arms folded. Then she said, "Elias, do you know the first thing I thought when I woke here after the fever?" "No." "I heard Mara outside. I heard you arguing with Mercy. I smelled beans burning. That was not my best morning." "It was," she said, "because I knew where every sound belonged." She looked toward the spring trough, the bean rows, the low roofline, the yard that had learned our footsteps. I have been moved from place to place by papers, by men, by hunger, by fear. This is the first place that learned me back. She lifted her chin. "So I am staying. Also, your accounts are a disgrace." "They are." "And the pantry shelf is wrong." "I thought you built it." "I built it before I knew better." That settled the matter. Summer came heavy and bright. The beans climbed. The goat kid learned to jump sideways for no reason. Bishop accepted the cart but maintained a public dislike of it. Tavi turned one shelf into 3 and began keeping records for 2 neighboring ranches who discovered, to their alarm, that she could find missing money faster than they could lie about it. Mara planted squash near the wash, where I said nothing would grow. It grew. She did not say I told you so. She did not have to. One Sunday evening, after rain had cooled the dust, the 3 of us sat outside under the eaves we had rebuilt. The old cracked post stood beside the new brace, both carrying the roof. Mercy chewed on a rag she had stolen from the wash line. Bishop dozed in the corral. Tavi read aloud from a newspaper story about a railroad baron losing a court case, which pleased her more than was spiritually healthy. Mara leaned against my shoulder as if she had been made tired by holding up the world and had finally delegated part of it to me. I looked at the roof beam above us. I thought of Mercy Draw, the freight scale, the rope, the crates, the men who had tried to turn timber into a sentence and fear into law. I thought of the same material in my own hands months later. Posts set straight, rafters braced, a table repaired, a shelf made level. Wood that once meant danger in my memory, now holding shade over the heads of people I loved. Maybe that is all a life is sometimes. Not becoming pure, not forgetting what was done. Just taking the same things the world used to threaten you and teaching them a different work. Tavi finished reading and folded the paper. The evening settled around us, full of small sounds. Goat teeth, horse breath, crickets, Mara breathing beside me. The house cooling stone by stone after the day's heat. Nobody asked where we would go next. There was no next place waiting with a better claim. Mara reached up and touched the repaired post once, lightly, like she was greeting an old scar. Then she took my hand again. Above us the roof held, and beneath it, so did we.